Yes, one of the things that I beg your discretion on it. The revolt in the army was influenced by the Latin Congress. I came to Trinidad unannounced. I went to New York just for a weekend. And these two girls told me, but you have to go to Trinidad with us. So I said, why? Because we're going to Carnival. I said, yes, but why me? They say, well, because they met me at the Black Writers Congress and they wanted to talk more with me. And they were more interested in a relationship, to tell the truth. And it is during that period that Rex came to a meeting that this boy who died recently, this historian, he still lives in Irish Avenue. Anyhow, Tony Martin had a party and he invited myself and Wally Lupline. Because Wally Lupline lived almost opposite to him. And Rex invited Franklin Harvey and myself down to the base. So they went down, I knew Rex as a child. And that was one evening, then they invited us back another evening again. But that was even the day after. And Rex said, Rafa is going to tell them about it. So Raf said, no, you tell him. And he said, no, you tell him. And then they began to tell me about the coup that they were planning. And it was a direct result of the Black Writers Congress. Because I was.
You were the link?
Yeah.
So I saw it was something of Rafi Charu, and he did mention you I can't remember the exact source, I but he didn't mention it in that context at all. He was talking about people who were influential at the time and so on. Yeah.
But that is what really happened. That's when they wrote it to me that they went to Cuba and they had asked me to do certain things for them. Yeah. And I had agreed. And so I became involved in this group that was planning this, what it had to do with the Black Writers Congress. So I don't know how if that is going to be mentioned without compromising anybody.
Yeah.
But it was a coup d'etat. It was no revolt. It was a coup d'etat.
So I wanted to go back a little bit too, because you're one of the things that you mentioned in one of the essays is that you are not often mentioned when we talk about Congress.
Yeah.
Partly because you didn't really belong to the academic community and you were not in those circles per se, but you were basically, with respect to that community, that academic community, and essentially an outsider. Right? How do you feel about that? How, it is a little bit anomalous when if you call your name together, CLR, Lamy, Best, and all these other they're all essentially academic.
Yeah.
You are not that.
No. I am what you may call a Johnny come lately. It just happened that I happen to be I am working class. I come from poverty in Mozica in when Mozica was forest. Right? My grandmother and my grandfather, plus my father, were illiterate. So I had no background at all. I had to start from scratch. And had my mother not sent me to England, I might have become criminals, in the sense that I was part of invaders, and invaders had a lot of violent people, and I soon caught up too. I was, and people spoke to her and told her, you better get that boy out of here because sooner or later he's going to get into trouble. Because who was my, what do you call them now? Mentor. But people like Ellie Manuel, Bernie Manuel particularly, who was the most violent one, used to always choose me to go anywhere with him. Because he said I would stand up, I wouldn't run. So that's how I was going in that direction.
But you were essentially a percussionist.
I became a percussionist. I could play pan.
Right. You started with pan.
I started with pan. And when I went to England, I started to work with Russell Henderson. And occasionally, I started to play congas. I liked congas. I liked timbales. I liked percussion. And eventually, I started playing percussion professionally. And ended up working with Edmund Ross.
That's very remarkable.
Yes, one day the phone rang in the Students' Union, Raymond Watts, telephone, I go to the telephone. This is Mr. Ross's secretary. We'd like to ask you if you want to come and do a audition. And that's how I went.
And you played congas?
I played congas, I played timbales. I played all the percussion instruments. I just really liked it. Kira, guiro, anything in percussion.
And I saw that at the Congress, you played a mention of
Raymond
Watts and his combo band.
Yes. I had a combo, and to raise funds for the Black Writers Congress, I had this combo, and they worked with me, and I said, we have to do some charity, we have to pay for the Congress. And so that is where some of the money started coming from. But apart from my taking out of my salary, which was rather small as a porter on the trains, we raised more money by playing. People came out, the place was packed. We don't know how much they made, we just played it.
But how, you had explained to me that there was a familial situation that took you from London to Montreal.
Oh yes. Alvin Johnson, who was married to my wife's sister, was one of the key figures in the conference committee, the Prevention and Exile Conference Committee. And himself and another guy from, both of them had just written their PhD thesis and submitted it and accepted. And they were on their way back. They went to Toronto to carry back some paintings, and they were coming back in Lloyd West's Volkswagen. Incidentally, when I went down to the base, I went down in Lloyd West, he loaned me his car. And Lloyd West Volkswagen again was part of that 1970 situation. But they hit a ice block, ice patch, black ice, and both of them died. And that's how the mother of my wife, my mother-in-law then, was asked to call and convince me that I should go to Canada. Because I didn't want to go. At the time, the Beatles manager was inquiring about the group that I had.
What was the name of the group?
I just Raymond Watts combo.
Okay. No, so you mentioned Lloyd West, right? And along the way, you dropped some huge names.
Yes.
Who are some of the more outstanding personalities from that era? Do you remember?
As musicians?
No, as academic people,
oh.
as big thinkers. And
okay. Wilson Harris.
Okay, well, tell me a little bit about this. I mean, he just died, as you know.
Yeah, Wilson Harris was a very difficult person to understand. He was very complicated, and I didn't understand him. I never read Palace of the Peacock. I tried to, but it wasn't making sense. And I read something else like Secret Ladder, something like that. And he was talking to him was a task, trying to understand what he was so philosophic, deeply philosophic. There was Andrew Salkey.
Just before we move on from so Wilson Harris, you met him in England.
Yes, at the class.
Okay, so he was involved
Yes.
with CLR?
Yes.
Yes. And he was very philosophical. What kind of personality?
He was a very introverted person. He was soft-spoken and very inward. You know, you had to talk to him in order to get him to respond, to make any sense out of what he was saying, which I didn't.
You ever went on that line with him, or just...
No. We had that class every Friday evening. So he wasn't a regular member. Like Lamin wasn't a regular member either. Neither was Andrew Salkey. Or what's this guy named who wrote The Lonely Londoners.
Yeah,
Samuel Selvan. He paid an occasional visit. But that is how it happened. People would come by and you wouldn't even know who they were, but they heard of it and would like to sit in one of the sessions. I don't know why, because I didn't find it very enlightening. Now, looking back now, he concentrated on the collected works of Marx and Engels. Now, I read Marx, I read Engels, but to read Marx and Engels collected works, I never really was interested in doing that because it was so complicated, and CLR would be talking above my head. I was the only worker there. Everybody else there was at London School of Economics. Stanley French and his wife, Richard Small, Walter, Norman Govan, and Charita Bent, who was his first wife. Charita Bent was also there. We only had about 3 years, I think, including Selma James. But what they didn't realize was they had a foreigner among them, because that's what I was, really, a foreigner. I didn't understand. I wasn't an academic person at all. I worked in a plastic factory at the time, and I played music to make up $1. And so they would, you know, CLR, I remember CLR, this, who he was talking about, in the French Revolution. He said, he is a rascal, you know, and he would continue to laugh about it. I didn't find anything like that. I didn't find anything interesting to laugh about because I didn't understand.
So you mentioned Salkey along the road. Did you have any relationship with him?
Salkey, no. I know he spoke with I think, English accent or simulated English accent. He didn't speak like a Jamaican. But I never really had any. I was just a foreigner. I couldn't talk to those people at all.
But Selvan was a kind of regular kind of guy. You got along with it?
No, I never spoke to him. I went to his home once with his brother-in-law, and he came out. He passed us straight. Very snobbish, extremely snobbish. Calvin Harrison, Calvin Harrison's sister was married to Somerset Run, and they lived I can't remember now, somewhere in the southeast, or some, I don't know where, I can't remember, not many years now.
What about the Nightfall brothers?
No, no.
But they owned the that system.
No.
Walter Rodney, now apparently there was a relationship.
Yes. Walter joined the class, I think after me, my memory serves me right. But let's put it that he was there, and I forget when he joined the class. Walter, everybody used to be silent. That's one thing I noticed. One person I know asked a question once or twice was Norman Govan. I thought to myself, well, this guy must be really bright boy, you know, to be dealing with this. But I was doing my reading. Other than that, going to the library and doing my reading. And one night, I don't know if we should publish this, but one night we were coming back from I still carry my first daughter, wrapped in a blanket and pampers and everything, and asked excuse when she did have tools, and she had come back, but I wanted to be there. When Leroy Butcher said that I had a thirst for knowledge, that is true. I had a thirst for knowledge. I really wanted to know. However, we reached Cricklewood Station, and I didn't understand. I don't remember what was it. I asked Norman what CLR meant by that, and Norman snickered and said, "You wouldn't understand that, you know. I'll take you a little while too." And Walter started to laugh. And Walter reminded Norman of the first time I ever spoke in public. Somebody asked me to pass a vote of thanks in the West Indian Students' Union. As a result of the visit of Scotland Yard superintendent, who was doing some kind of inter-community work. And boy, they said, no, we call on Raymond Watts to pass a vote of thanks. Boy, he could have sentenced me to hell, because I don't know what I said. I just couldn't stop, because I didn't know where to end. I didn't know where to begin to start with. And Walter found that very funny. But it wasn't very funny. It was very painful. And I think that marked the beginning of my developing a determination to understand. And I began to read. What's this guy? He always mentioned from Africa, he used to advise Nkrumah. Oh God, whoever he is. I read his work, his Life and Struggle of Negro Toilers. And unless I was really stupid, I found it really baseless. And then myself and Kenneth Ramchan went downtown to shop for books, and I bought his book called Pan-Africanism or Communism, and I read it. But I had already read the Marshall Plan, and I said, but he's recommending a Marshall Plan for Africa. And that, you know what we're talking about now?
Yeah.
Who?
No, I know the idea that
right.
Yeah.
Right. But nevertheless, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We'll remember it in due course. And that's where I began to question CLR. I began to question CLR over some remarks he made about the Russian Revolution and about Stalin in particular, who everybody hated. I myself had no choice. I hated Stalin too, because everybody, those who were supposed to know, were saying that Stalin was this terrible man and whatnot. And I thought, you know, their arguments are very similar. You know, and my brother-in-law, who was a Marxist-Leninist as well, and attached to the revolutionary movement in Africa. He was very active, like he knew Che. For instance, he invited me to go to Geneva to meet Che, and I couldn't go because my wife was pregnant with my second daughter, and almost to have her, and I didn't. And he was, I didn't know why he was insisting that I go, because he invited me before to something in Moscow, and I didn't go either, because my wife was also pregnant with his first daughter. So, and when he came back, he brought pictures of them smoking cigars and all, and I said, boy, I wish I had gone.
I want to come back to these studies,
yeah.
right? Because it's right here.
Yeah.
You have any pictures, by the way? You know anything?
No, nothing.
But describe it, okay, so everybody was gathered in this space. Describe the space and what it felt like. You're sitting here, sulkies on the left, water on the right, still one coming in the back here, and I have all these luminaries.
Well, most people sat on the floor. Sierra alone sat in a chair.
You sat on the feet.
Yes. Yeah.
Right, and so describe how would a session run? You would just
well,
on for hours?
Well, we would start at a certain time, which I noticed most of them always were late. And although I had to bring a child and travel on the bus, I would reach there before them. And I noticed that. But when we assembled, hardly anybody asked any questions. That I remember. And I recall my trying to ask a question, but tongue-in-cheek. Embarrassed like hell because, you know, I'm among the luminaries, you know, and who the hell am I? I have a terrible inferiority complex in that environment. But it took place, and one night, out of the blue, CLR said, I was asked to cover the cricket in the West Indies, and I'm going to leave. So in other words, there will be no Friday night meeting. I thought that was weird. At least he could have told us that he was going before. When he left, the group just...
Nobody tried to revive it?
Yeah, Norman tried to, but nobody could replace CLR.
So people will sit on the ground, taking notes, and
some may take notes, others just listen. And invariably, people did not ask questions.
And how long the session would go?
I would say about 3 hours, because we used to have a break in which we were in the kitchen and have coffee. But
Selma James was his wife at the time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what I saw somewhere that, you know, she's one of the underreported people. A lot of people don't really pay respect to the kind of effort she did.
Yes.
What were your impressions of her?
I thought she understood CLR properly. I thought she was the only person that really understood CLR. But she was of the Trotskyite persuasion, and that created a conflict between herself and Walter Rodney and CLR. Walter Rodney came to the conference, the meeting, with 3 white guys from the British Communist Party. So I learned after who they were. and they were right at the entrance to their bedroom in the corridor, and they were arguing, and their voices started to raise. That was during the break. And I remember between Sierra and Selma, coming down on the three guys and Walter. And one stage I heard them talking about Stalinists. And eventually the three guys left. And after the three guys left, Walter hung around a little bit, and before we went back into session, he left. And he never came back. The next time I saw Walter was at the Black Writers Congress. And they didn't know him. Rosie didn't know him. Robert Hill called to find out if they would extend an invitation to him. And Rosie said, Walter, who is that? And I said, give me the phone. And I said, what do you want to come to the conference? He said, yes. I said, okay, I'll arrange it for you. And that's how Walter came to the conference. Because Rosie didn't know who he was. Nobody knew who he was. He might have been known in Jamaica, but Rosie and they didn't know him. And they were very particular as to who they were invited.
What kind of relationship you have with Stokely?
No relationship at all. I was very suspicious of him. Because I had met with James Foreman, and James Foreman had run down what had happened between Stokely leaving SNCC and going into the Black Panthers, and what transpired, that he tried to railroad SNCC into the Black Panthers, and James Foreman wouldn't have it, and stood up in the Congress, wherever they had the Congress, and expressed his view. And Black Panther put a gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger without a shot in it. And that gave him a nervous breakdown. So he had talked to me about it.
You interacted with Stokely at all?
No.
Like during the Congress? Because you were
no. I went to meet him. My job was to go to the airport and meet everybody and bring them to the conference. And I went to pick up himself and Miriam. And Rosie turned up. That was the kind of person Rosie was, an opportunist. He turned up at the same time. I remember Miriam was sitting on the baggage. And he just took them and left me standing in the airport. It didn't matter to me in any event because I didn't have any political ambition, so to speak. I just really wanted to see all the black writers come under one roof and speak about the things that had happened, because I had met Malcolm before in England. And Malcolm, a guy called Kofi Okwabi, and a Ghanaian called Kojo Godfrey. He had selected us to form an organization called AACC, Afro-American Caribbean Congress. And it never did materialize because Malcolm got killed about 2 or 3 weeks after.
What was it like meeting him?
Oh, he reminded me very much of a brother of mine. He laughed the same way. I was sitting next to him in the audience at one stage, and I didn't know who he was. And he asked me to let him pass, so I pulled my leg and he passed.
That was in London?
In London, yes, at the Council of African Organization. And John Maxwell was standing right by the entrance to go upstairs. And he said, Raymond, meet Malcolm X. And I was sitting right next to him, and I didn't know that he was a red guy. I always thought he was a black guy, you know? And yes. And afterwards, he sent to call me because Michael X, who was the Freitas, had told him that he had an organization with 10,000 black people in London. And Kofi Annan said, if anybody will know, I would know. So he asked them to ask me to come. And then he said, say, brother, you know a guy called Michael the Freitas? I said, yes. But I knew of him because he used to collect rent for a Jewish slumlord, where people like George Islap and Desmond Adam, all of us used to live in one building. And I said, yes, I know of him. So he said, if there was an organization here with 10,000 black people, would you have known access to do with that? And he said, yeah, you don't know of any of such organizations? I said, no. And then he began to talk with me and he said, you know, one thing led to the next. And I don't think that's what you want to hear on this. You would like to go on.
No. I find this is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because somebody had died before the Congress.
Yes.
Right? So, but was he somebody you would have wanted to see there?
Yes, I would have been able to do it. I would have known him because he wanted me to come to he gave me a copy of ballots or the bullets and message to the grassroots in a big, those 33 thing inside a Sam Cooke record jacket. But it was warped.
So you ever kept yelling things?
No, I said that we had promised I would send it back to him, and when he died, I sent it back to him.
Okay.
I sent it back to his wife.
Yeah. Okay. That is amazing.
I should have kept it.
Yeah.
Nobody would have known because he gave it to me.
Yeah.
And you know, I listened to it, but it was warped.
So tell me about now you are the periphery, I sort of, but unwillingly be drawn more and more into the central organizing of this thing in 60s. Right? But
You mean the conference?
the conference.
The conference. I did it, you know. To be honest, I didn't discuss it with anybody. I had just finished reading the 59, the Rome conference, and the Paris 2 conferences, and I was fascinated by their speeches, and I always thought in my mind, I would like to organize something like this. So that when these guys were having a problem with that regional problem, I looked at it on a broader area, and I suggested that we bring all the black writers under one roof and let them express their views, and we will get a direction from there. And that was, it seemed to me the only logical thing to do, because they had just shot Martin Luther King, and the place was a mess. Vietnam was in the heights, and that was the only thing that I could think of. That is what made me think of the Black Writers Congress. So that when I said, look, if I were you guys, because there was a lot of fights going on between Burnham supporters, Chetty supporters, people who believed that the CIA had overthrown Chetty. I too believe that as well. And so I was more in Chetty's corner. So that when Franklin Harvey and Tim Hector came back from Toronto meeting with Burnham, and with a copy of the proceedings of the last conference, with the two of them flanking Burnham, I said, this is not for me. And I told Alfie that, and Alfie agreed with me, but then Alfie turned water order according to Che, water order in British on the level. And that was Alfie went over to the other side, you know, and that I suppose they may have had a view of black nationalism, which was functional, was very prevalent at the time, black nationalism. And so he did his Black Writers Congress as something of black nationalism. So that was to shut me up, in other words. But I still went back to them on several occasions and pleaded with them and said to them, look, you have all the facilities for this. Why don't we do it? And they never answered.
So, something that puzzles me a little bit. The academics were sort of conflating the Marxist-Leninist struggle with black nationalism. I would say, well, if we're talking about Marxist-Leninists, we have to be very clear. They were a Trotskyite position. There was the Marxist, there was the Stalinist position, there was the Leninist position, there was the Marxist position. But these guys followed CLR to the letter. I couldn't, because it didn't make sense to me. It just did not make sense to me. What was the essential clash of ideas when it came to, in a practical sense, with respect to Caribbean people, between the Trotsky position on revolution and the Marxist?
Okay. To answer that question, I will have to add a little addition to it. See, although CLR and Trotsky had differences of opinion, Trotsky I forget the name of the dark, I can't remember the name of the book now. I came across where Trotsky referred to CLR as a West Indian recalcitrant. And I didn't know why Trotsky would have said that and why they would say following CLR because of Trotsky's position. So that confused me somewhat. Remember, I am learning. I'm in the process, still learning. I was in a position of really infancy. And these guys were authorities because they were doing PhDs and so on, and they read much more than me. So I took a submissive position, subordinate position to them. But that's what was happening. The conference committee was taken over by Trotskyites.
This is what the Caribbean Conference,
the Caribbean Conference
right.
Committee was taken over by Trotskyites, and they wanted to go to Guyana because Forbes Burnham offered them the support. They didn't have any support at all. Nobody took them on seriously about their conference. That's why I said, what are you going to the Caribbean for? You're in here. Why don't you deal with the situation here? And they couldn't understand that, and they made it look as though, well, I didn't know what I was saying, and probably I didn't know what I was saying, I know.
Yes.
There were so many questions, and so many people in a line that somebody moved a motion that everybody be allowed 5 minutes. And everybody was agreeing to that. Walter, all of them did 5 minutes. And when it came to Lloyd said, Mr. Chairman, I want to inform you that I do not intend to be brief. Well, what? In a black nationalist environment, you speak, and they hated him, man. The people in Montreal, black people in Montreal hated him because he never really participated in that, plus he had a white wife. So they didn't want to hear. Some of the women started to shout, we don't want to hear you, shut up! And he was talking above them.
So you think he was pleased at any stage that he wasn't given a substantive?
I think too, yes.
And even though, as you had explained, he was the one who went to McGill and basically encouraged them.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And that I want, I think, the essence of this discussion is that had it not been for Lloyd, we would not be talking about the Black Writers Congress. I think so. And it was 9 days before the Congress and we didn't have a cent.
And his relationship with people like Rosie and
Oh, bad.
and Tim Hector.
Oh, bad. He was isolated.
But he was very, he was an admirer of CLR.
I don't know if he was. I don't know if he was, because he used to criticize CLR as well. And from where I stood, at the time I figured he was anti-CLR as well. So I was confused as to what he stood for really, you know?
Yeah, he definitely wasn't ideological, because even the philosophy,
yeah,
when it's performing tapia,
that's what he told me.
You need to build your own thing from the ground,
yes,
and coming up. So that's sort of, he was for building an indigenous ideology.
Yes. Yes.
So was that kind of sentiment current at the time? Or
yes, well, a matter of fact, take what you could learn from this. People were shouting, "Shut up, Uncle Tom!" And after, when I went outside, Wally was talking. Probably Wally must have been the only person ever to talk with him, because he and Wally were good friends. And he turned to me and he said, "Doctor, they call me Uncle Tom." They call me Uncle Tom, doctor. And I said, "Well, you know, Lloyd, you didn't use the discretion. You knew what the atmosphere was inside of there, the environment that was inside of there, and you really stepped out of bounds." I don't know how he responded to that. I can't remember now. But I know I told him that.
Something that I think Evans wrote in a book, and you mentioned, there's a kind of a dynamic between the black Canadians,
yes,
and the Caribbean Canadian blacks.
Yes.
And there would have been an additional dynamic with the African
yes, yes,
which formed Black Panthers and so on.
yes.
How was it negotiating that kind of?
Well, to tell the truth, we were suspicious that the FBI, from what some of the progressive blacks that came up was suggesting that the FBI sent them to confuse the conference, to break up the conference.
As the Black Panthers?
Yes, some of them. We didn't know who was who. So at one stage, on one of my trips, I heard that there was a confusion going on inside, and as the position that I was in, I went into the room, and they were talking about, "You guys are Uncle Tom. You guys, how could you have a Black Writers Congress in a white university?" And on hearing that, I said, "Well, could you tell me of a black university that would have been able to finance this conference?" And they couldn't answer to that. And I remember stamping my foot in the middle and said, "You know, this is what is going on here, scandalous." You know, and I turned to Rosie, who was looking down from on top. I said, "Rosie, you're the chairman at this conference. Did you know this was going on?" He told me yes. I said, "Did you agree with this?" He said yes. I said, "I'll deal with you after."
So they had the Congress went on for 4 days.
4 days.
Right, and you had people delivering papers.
Yes. But I wasn't there when they were doing that.
Were there like resolutions and so on coming out?
Yes.
What was this? What did you do?
I was transporting people from the airport and making sure that the guests didn't get into the wrong hands.
Yeah.
And that's why I took that responsibility. Because that time they killed Malcolm and they had just killed Martin Luther King, and anything could have happened. So I wanted to be sure, and I took that responsibility to make sure that I got them there and I got them back to the airport. Some of them just came to speak and go.
But Walter didn't make it back?
No, Walter remained. Himself and Bobby Hill went back together, and he called me from just before to tell me he didn't have enough money to pay the taxi. I said, "You have no money of your own?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Well, use that and let me know how much it costs and I will send the money to you." And they left. And about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang. And my wife said, "Oh my God, you're not again anymore." She said, "Don't answer the phone." I don't answer the phone. She answered the phone. And she said, "It's water running on the phone." "Yeah. Where are you?" "I'm in Toronto." "What are you doing in Toronto?" He said, "Well, they didn't let me in Jamaica. And I'm here pending my return to Guyana. And I don't want to return to Guyana because I fear they will kill me." I said, "Okay. Give me your phone number and stay by the phone." And from then, then I really realized how much power I had. I was able to call people at their home 2 o'clock in the morning and say, "Can you pledge your account for," he told me that they wanted $40,000 as a pledge. And I was calling people, and fellas who I wouldn't call normally said, yes, count me in. And by 7 o'clock in the morning I had the $40,000.
You had said that the Canadian authorities detained him.
Yes.
What was
Well, they sent him back from Jamaica to the last place where he boarded a flight. And from there they were going to send him to Guyana.
So they wanted a bond or something?
They wanted a bond. It's a bond.
1 year, yeah.
Yeah. And the bond was $40,000.
Right.
$40,000 in those days was a lot of bread. And fellas just shell out their money. And that's how he got through and came down.
How long did he stay in Canada after?
I don't remember how long he stayed. I do know that I went to the airport to meet him, and because the lawyer called me to tell me that he would be on a flight at 6 o'clock. So I said, okay, I'll be in the airport at 6 o'clock. When I reached the airport, he was there. I don't know how he knew, but he was there, and he just whisked him off. And they just went about the business. That is the kind of politics that was taking place there. And that is who Rosie was. Rosie Douglas was. A real snake. And what happened after? Oh, at about 3 o'clock one morning, the bell rang. And I looked up and I saw 2 black guys. And I recognized one as the Haitian, from the Haitian Revolutionary Movement. So I went outside and said, we're going to want to help the water because it's likely to be in danger. Can you arrange it? I said, sure, I'll try. And I think the students were in Sir George developing the momentum, and he spoke there the next day. But I didn't know where he was staying. And then I found out that he was staying at Rosie's house. So the night I went there, they were having a party. They came out and I said, "Is the water in?" "Yeah." The water came out. I said, "Where's the bag?" "Where are the police?" He just grabbed them and come. You see, I said, "Don't ask me any questions, just grab them and come." And I drove him all the way up to the top of Mount Royal. And then we came out of the car and walked a little distance for security reasons, just in case the car was out. And I told him what I had learned, and that I would like him to be ready by tomorrow evening, so that I would get this message back, and we'll pick you up. And that's what I did. And he disappeared. And I used to hear from him by underground mail. And of course, I have a very controversial brother who told my mother that she should get rid of all my letters. You see a lot from Walter, from Lloyd Best. And she said, he told me that these things should be destroyed because he said both ways. They're going to
Just one last thing, because sitting on water. So you were able to follow his goings and comings when he went back to Guyana.
No, he didn't go back to Guyana.
No, when he went back.
He went eventually, yes.
The AFC and so on.
Yes.
That is the WPA.
Yes.
How were you able to follow his activities?
Well, actually, I came home, and I had I became the assistant deputy leader of the February movement.
Okay.
And with Millet, yes. And eventually, the question of water being a hindrance came up because he wasn't cooperating with Chelly, but he didn't have an organization, and Chelly had an organization, and Millet in one meeting decided that they should send me to talk to Walter, and I was to leave. See, like the following Thursday, one morning, the daughter came in and said, "Daddy, you just shot your friend." I said, "Who?" She said, "Walter." And I remember, it shocked me so hard that I started to cry. You know, and I was saying, you know, what will it take? What will it take to get rid of the CIA? But that's how it happened. I didn't go to the funeral. But it happened. Ironically, his wife was living upstairs of where I lived in Toronto. And only one day I met her in the university and asked her where she lived. She told me. I said, "What apartment? What floor?" I said, "That's about me." And she lived there for about 3 years. I didn't know she was there.
Yeah, so I didn't know you were involved with these Millet and
yes, yes.
What about Conte?
It ended. I don't know.
Finally went to Canada or something.
No, he's in the States. He teaches at our university, and he should be well with the age now.
Yeah. He is older than I.
Everybody, he must be in his 90s.
Yes, yeah. And the family, so they would see the Rustin.
Yeah.
His son and my sister were
David.
And when David died,
yeah. Yes.
All of us sort of went through that.
Yeah.
I know that James wasn't the same after that.
Yes. He told me.
Yeah.
I wasn't in Trinidad at the time when it happened.
But when you came back to Trinidad?
I came back after that. Trying to remember now. I better not say a time because I know that it is after David died.
Yeah. So, and then you came back to do what you came back?
I came back home to live with my family. And I had a little printry. And that's how I came into contact with facing the Tribune. I used to publish the Tribune for him.
Okay.
For free. Miller was a very difficult, very difficult guy to work with.
Yeah.
And we went our different ways. I went back to Canada, and he went to the United States.
So who was some of the people you were in touch with, Michael Laos at the time?
No. I knew Michael and I knew his Cabrera was part of was part of the group.
Yeah. And I know that they attempted the People's Popular Movement. They actually ran an election in
yes.
86, I think, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, Weidmar.
Yes.
Cabrera. Michael Laos was the political leader.
Yes.
You were back at that time, or you were?
No, I think I had left by then.
Okay.
I had left by then.
Okay. So what's your what's your assessment of Trinidad and Tobago?
I think that Trinidad and Tobago is a very good example of disinformation, misinformation, and, for want of a better word, a bacchanalian atmosphere. The intellectuals, in my mind, do have a concrete view of the options that that is obvious, must be introduced in order to make any change. Hardly anybody want to call themselves a Marxist, but if they did, they stand the risk of being ridiculed as a crazy person, to put, for want of a better word. That Marxism is something that only stupid people, or people who are really, they don't know their way. They just grab onto something. I don't know, but the way in which I was introduced to Marxism is on my own. I had to read Das Kapital. It was very difficult. Very, very, very difficult. Until eventually I found the method that he used was the dialectical process. He made a point, elaborated on the point, and if you follow him, if you take that position with him, then it's all sailing. It's easy to understand. Because he makes the point and develops the point and develops the point and develops the point. It's the same argument that labor is the source of all value. That ideas are the phenomenon divided into three categories, where the idea, labor, and concrete reality. Where the labor, therefore, becomes the most important part of human activity. The idea gives rise, the labor makes the idea concrete. And that when it becomes concrete reality, it's divided into two categories, use value and exchange value. And it's exchange value that the strong manage to create capitalism out of it. And use value remains the worker having to be a consumer. The consumer and